Rev up your engine. Okay, we got a 2015 Mustang Ecoboost, the 4-cylinder. People say good things, they say bad things. Well, the guy's owned this since new. He's got like 138,000 miles on it. We're going to tell you how it's held up, and it's got a brake problem we're going to analyze. Now, they all look the same, whether they got the V8 or 4 or whatever. They don't all have Semper Fi marine tags on them, but they're beautiful looking cars. He bought this for his wife, and he's got the Army Air Medal, just like my son. When you look under the hood, what makes this different than a regular Mustang, it's got both hydraulics, and if you don't trust them, it's got a prop rod too. Hey, best of both worlds, right? It's the Ecoboost 4-cylinder engine. Now, it's an original European design because they got all these weird taxes there. If you got a big V8, they tax the heck out of them. So they decided to make a 4-cylinder engine. It's got a turbocharger on, it's got GDI injection, and interestingly enough, even though it's got all that, you can run it on premium or regular. And to prove my point, he only runs it on 87. He doesn't take it to the track or anything, and it runs fine. It's not burning oil. He takes care of it. He's an ex-Army guy. He appreciates his machinery. He doesn't beat the heck out of them. Comes off the highway, step on the brake, it'll start sinking, and when he lets go and pushes down, it stops sinking, it stops creeping forward. So he took it to the Ford dealer, said, look, I want it analyzed. Tell me what's wrong. And he thought he's going to talk to the mechanic in the shop. Well, he comes out, and the mechanic's just out in the parking lot with the car. And the mechanic says, well, we don't know if it's the master cylinder leaking or if it's the anti-lock brake system. He responded, yeah, that's what I told you. Which one is it? Can you tell me? Well, Ford doesn't give us any equipment to be able to figure it out, blah, blah, blah. Well, at least the dealer was honest enough. They probably saw the marine tags. Maybe it made him shake in their boots a little. They didn't charge him anything for it, but they didn't tell him what was wrong. So let's use my monster scan tool out. We're going to check the brake system out with a fine-tooth comb. So we're plugging it into the dash. So we'll push it. We won't start it, but we want the idiot lights on. And we'll start doing some analysis. Now, it's read it perfectly fine. It's got the VIN number. It's a Mustang 2015. We'll do a diagnosis. And we're not really worrying about anything but the braking system. So let's do the ABS. We're going to see if it's got any fault codes. And there aren't any trouble codes. So we'll do the continuous memory codes. Again, there's no trouble codes. So now we'll go further. We'll go into actuation tests. It's left front, left rear, right front, and right rear. There's a zillion different tests you can do. It's sinking. So it's not that those isolation valves are bad. If they're bad, they'll open up when they're not supposed to open up, and then pedal will go down to the floor. But these are decent software that Ford has in these things. And the very fact that there's no codes on this thing are telling me that ABS module should be good, because it'll generally trip wacky codes when they do that. It'll know that something's not working right, it'll trip a code. And it hasn't tripped any codes yet. Now, he hasn't done anything to the car. If somebody had done brake work and they got air in the system, then you'd have to do the service bleed with this computer that'll show exactly how to do the service bleed. It gives you all the different things that you have to do and tells you everything. But there's no point in going through all that stuff because he hasn't had the system touched. Air's got to get in the system from somewhere. He hasn't had it touched. Tip of the iceberg is he's never had to add brake fluid. So it's not losing brake fluid anywhere. If you're losing fluid, of course you hit the pedal, it'll go down, but you're going to lose fluid. He's not losing any fluid at all. So let's take it for a spin. Now, just out of curiosity, since there's a lot of feedback, I'm going to scan the whole system, see if there's any codes of any sort. It's got all these miles on it, and it still doesn't have any codes. So take it for a road test and record the data, see if anything weird happens. We're going to record it all. Hey, it's got plenty of horsepower, but of course, it doesn't make that V8 noise, and that turns a lot of Americans off. They want a Mustang with that nice growl from a V8, and they're not that happy with an inline 4 noise. Take it out to our little drag strip and give it a good test. I gotta say, it does handle quite well. With the 4-cylinder engine, it weighs a lot less than the V8, so you got a better weight ratio in the thing. It's not all front heavy like a V8 engine is. We'll get to the little drag strip here. We'll hit it hard, then we'll hit the brakes hard too. And there's nobody behind or in front of us, so here we go. Got decent acceleration. Now it is losing probably about 45 horsepower because it's running on regular instead of high test. But as anybody knows, you don't have the torque that a V8 has. But now we'll hit the brakes hard. and it stops fine, but I can feel the brake pedal sinking. We'll see what the computer says about that. Now, personally, I'd miss the V8 rumble, but as you can see here, even driving it like a maniac here, it's still averaging 20.3 miles a gallon. If this was a V8, it'd be more like 8 or 9, the way I'm driving. Maybe even 3. And of course, a 4-cylinder engine can't take the abuse that a V8 can. But, like I said, this guy bought it for his wife. She drives relatively conservatively. He doesn't take it to the drag strip or anything. He only runs regular gas in it. Hey, and it's gone 130,000 miles. It still runs perfectly fine. Only problem he's got is the brakes sinking. So we'll go to the think file data, go to the Ford one, see if it's picked up on anything. And again, it hasn't picked up on anything. So not being a trusty soul, I don't trust anybody. Look at all the wheels. See if there's a leak. We can see dry as a bone. The inside's dry as a bone. We're gonna do all 4 wheels, of course. That's dry as a bone. The inside's dry. That's dry as a bone. That's dry as a bone. Nice paint job to it. And the inside's dry. So he's not lying to me. Why would he be lying to me? But if you have a leak anywhere in the system, it's gonna make it sink. But of course, his comes and goes. If you got a physical leak, come on. Every time you step on it, it's going to squirt out because there's over 1,000 PSI inside there. When you slam the brakes on hard, it's always going to leak, and it hasn't. So the only logical solution is the brake master cylinder leaking inside itself. It's like a heart murmur. You can have a heart murmur. Your heart valves might not work right, and it leaks inside you. You're not squirting blood out, and you're not having blood leaking inside your system either, which is what this one's got to be doing. Now, it only does it when you stop real hard, and then you sit a while, it gradually sinks down. So this isn't a dangerous thing that, okay, you hit the brakes, it goes to the floor. Since all the electronics and all my testing doesn't show any problems in that system, the only thing really left, one of 2 things. Either the master cylinder or the booster. If you notice, it's still got a conventional vacuum booster on it. And here's a good test for a vacuum booster. Let's say you're running on the car, you hit the brake, the car's running, and it sinks to the floor. Then what you want to do is turn the car off, push the button, turn it off, and then step on it again. And if you step on it again, and it does not sink, that means the booster is bad. Because the master cylinder, if it's going bad, no matter whether the booster's working or not, it's going to sink to the ground because it's leaking inside itself with the seals not sealing. And instead of sending the pressure down to the brakes, it sends the pressure just inside back up to the reservoir. So you don't lose fluid because it's still inside the reservoir. If it only sinks while the car is running, then you have a bad booster. Now the owner doesn't want to do anything yet because as far as he's concerned, it's not really a safety problem because it only sinks after he stops and sits a while and it starts going down. And it doesn't start creeping forward or anything yet. As the Ford dealer wanted about $600 just to replace the master cylinder, he doesn't want to guess with that, and it costs a lot more to change the booster. If you're going down the road, you hit the brakes, they sink to the floor, it doesn't stop. That's dangerous. But this thing, it only happens after you drive it a while, hit the brakes, and then when you come to a stop, later it gradually starts sinking. And since that's such a new Mustang, if the booster did go out, I'll tell you, I'd be haranguing Ford. I'd say, hey, this booster went out already. I think you need to replace my booster because it should last a lot longer than that. He's going to drive it around and keep testing it. Every time it sinks, he's going to turn it off. And if it stops sinking and doesn't sink anymore, then he starts it up and it sinks. Then it'd be the booster. Generally, it'll be the master cylinder leaking inside itself. And that can be totally inconsistent depending on the temperature outside, the humidity out there. I used to have a Ford Maverick. Mind you, a much simpler car, but it did have a booster on it, right? And it would sink only in the winter up in Niagara Falls. In the summer, it didn't sink, right? I drove it 4 years that way and sold it to a guy, and we're still doing the same thing. I was a kid, I was too cheap to buy a master cylinder for it, so I just kept driving it, and it wouldn't sink in the summer, but it would sink in the winter. Seals are rubber, they'll expand, they'll contract with the temperature, even the humidity outside. Now, he just informed me. He was only at the Ford dealer for 30 minutes, so I doubt if they did any of the testing that I did. They probably just drove around and said, probably this or that. At least they didn't charge him the $150. So they didn't charge him anything for it. But that is the problem with all these dealerships. Everybody, including the mechanics, are under pressure to make a lot of money. They don't want to spend hours and hours trying to diagnose something correctly. They want fast money makers. I mean, I had a soldier bring me one last year, a Mustang. They said, oh, the Ford dealer couldn't figure out what was wrong. It took me 20 minutes to find out what was wrong. It was the sensor had gone bad. Right, I used my tool and figured it out. They just didn't want to go through the trouble of spending all that time. They just want fast turnaround, struts, shocks, water pumps, stuff they can make a lot of money that's easy to do. They don't want to get too far involved, but in this case, it's probably just the master cylinder. He's not losing fluid. It's not particularly dangerous yet, but if, say, you're a fanatic and you want everything perfect, get a new one. Don't get a rebuilt one. They're junk. Get a brand new OEM one, not one made in China, and replace it. But this isn't at the level that it's dangerous yet, because even though the master cylinder is a mechanical thing, the system itself does have gauges on it. So when it really starts to go bad and it's sinking, the brake light's going to come on, because it's going to lower the brake pressure too low. It hasn't done that yet, but if it does, you definitely want to change it then. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.